Just say over 50.
Okay. All right. We're going belly to belly tonight. We are excited for this one.
Just
15th
say over.
year as an associate head coach, over 50 All-Americans, 2017 Freestyle Coach of the Year. This gentleman has been very instrumental in the careers of New Jersey legends Jordan Burroughs and James Green. He also had the best winning percentage in Cornhusker history with 136 and 11 career record. He also has the best season in Cornhusker history with 43 and 3 record. He's a two-time NCAA finalist, a four-time NCAA Division One All-American, first in Nebraska history, a three-time state place winner, a Pennsylvania state champion, Nebraska associate head coach, Doc Bryan Snyder. Coach, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the kind introduction. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Yes, we are excited to have you. I think, is this our second Big Ten coach, Jim?
Third.
Third. Okay. Third Big Ten coach. So we're making the rounds. Yeah, coach. So I should have probably did this before we jumped on, but a little bit of background about Jimmy and I is we are both wrestlers. High school, Jimmy wrestled in college. I went the Division One cross country track and field route, lifelong athletes. Jimmy also has a purple belt in jujitsu. I run ultra marathons. I'm a three-time Leadville 100 finisher. And so we started this podcast when Jimmy was a freshman at the University of Colorado in Denver. So we'll get into some of that stuff with you. But we had about 50 episodes. Actually, our last episode before the world went sideways was with another New Jersey legend, Damian Hahn. And then people were sitting around twiddling their thumbs for a long time. And so everyone just said yes to come yuck it up with us and chop it up with us. So we've amassed 260 episodes at this point. We just had our 5th year anniversary, and you are, I think, our 62nd college wrestling coach. So we cover a lot of different things from running, wrestling, collegiate athletics. We've done post-traumatic stress stuff, traumatic brain injury, health and wellness, strength and conditioning, psychedelic research, you name it, we've probably got a topic on it. So we are honored to have you on. That's just a little bit about us. We are both Jersey guys. We know you're a Easton grad. It's kind of in that corner there. So I guess the first question to kind of get a little through line here with you is, have you ever wrestled someone from Phillipsburg?
Yeah, every year. No, they were our big rival. Sad though, I can't remember anyone's name. Is that bad or yeah, that's probably probably not great. But yeah, I mean that's our great rival in all sports, particularly wrestling and football. We have the famous football game on Thanksgiving Day, Easton versus Peaburg, over 100. I don't even know what it's up to now, 110 contests. Not quite consecutive, but there's over 100 of them. And yeah, every year we used to do it at Lafayette College. 3,500 people for a high school wrestling meet. Insane.
And would you say, even though you might not remember the people you wrestled, did you come out on the winning end more often than not?
Yeah. Yeah. At that time, like my years in high school, we were better than Peaburg. We had a good run though when I was in high school. That's when we went on our little national run.
Yeah.
Um, so the Peaburg match was very special. It was always, it was one of those things that you threw the records away because they always fought their butts off, as did we. But we were battling with Nazareth and Northampton, particularly at that
Mm.
time, because they were both in the valley and they were both like we were all at one point, I think, ranked in the top 15 in the country. And we see him in district, we see him in dual meets, we see him in districts, we see him in district duels, we see him at the regionals, we see him at state. So you end up wrestling these guys, for a million times. Yeah. So I love the Easton Peaburg tradition. I haven't been back to the match for a few years, but I was able to watch it this year. It was live streamed on YouTube, which was good. It came down to the last match. It was wild over in Peaburg.
Yeah, we've always heard because we're down from the shore area, so we always heard about those legendary matches and the pit and Coach Thompson and all those things. So I'm curious, Coach, you grew up in PA, close enough to Jersey, and then you also got to work with Jordan and James. So I'm sure you've probably spent some time in New Jersey. Do you have a weigh in on the great debate of pork roll versus Taylor ham?
I do. I'm a pork roll guy.
Yes, let's go.
I'm a pork roll guy. It's actually one of the four things that I get every time I go home. It's like within the first 24 hours, it's cheesesteak, hoagie, pizza, and pork roll sandwich. Pork roll, egg, and
Nice.
cheese if I can do it.
That's
Yes.
that's impressive up in that northern northwest corner over there. Usually that's Taylor ham country. How did you get converted?
I don't know. I never heard about Taylor ham until this debate started happening. When we grew up, it
Okay.
was always pork roll.
All right.
All right.
All right. Heck yeah. So, Coach, you spent some time in Denver as well. Jimmy and I, we've relocated since Jimmy's in Florida. I'm in South Carolina, but we spent about 4.5 years in Denver. As you said, that's where the podcast started. Um, where did you reside when you were living in Denver?
So I live like catty corner to the Capitol, Cap Hill, like
Okay.
13th and
Yeah.
Grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
My favorite coffee shop was right over there, City O City. I don't know if
Okay.
you guys remember that, but yeah,
All right.
that's where
Um,
I loved it.
when you were in Colorado, did you ever happen to do a 14er? It's a very Colorado centric question.
No, I didn't. I didn't do a lot of the things you're supposed to do in Colorado. Like one, I never even got on a set of skis. I never did a 14er. We did hike a lot, but they were more, Saturday morning, hour and a half hikes.
Sure.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, so I missed out on both of those things you're supposed to do when you live in Colorado.
All right. What high school did you work with when you were working out there?
Denver East.
All right. All right.
We
Jimmy and I are very familiar with Denver East. We used to frequent the farmers market from May through October. So we it's a very, very famous high school. It's
Yeah.
and I shot a student film that I directed there too, because we spent all the time going to the farmers market, and I was looking at it every Saturday, and I said, wow, this would be really cool in a film. So shot a film there as well. But yes, we were very familiar.
Yeah. It's great, man. Love my time in Denver.
Coach, to get back, were you done there, Rich? I didn't want to cut you off.
I was just gonna ask him one more Easton question, but I think you were probably gonna get to it too. So
So being a college coach and you recruit all around the country, and you're from Pennsylvania, and
Hmm.
Pennsylvania has been the powerhouse of high school wrestling, I would say 50, 40 years. What sets Pennsylvania wrestling apart, in your opinion?
It's just like anything. There's great tradition there, and then so you grow up, one, you have great tradition, you grow up with kids where wrestling means something to the next generation. So what does that mean? It means they get in the rooms, there's more kids in rooms. You have people that grew up wrestled from Pennsylvania, or wrestled elsewhere, or wrestled in college in Pennsylvania, and they're back as club coaches and high school coaches. So you get this mix of more people doing a sport that's been done forever, and you bring coaches back, and so you have good instruction, you have good competition, and they just level each other up, you know, and that's really it. That's the more like abstract, like outside looking in, in terms, you know, one of the things now that I live in the Midwest, they always talk about, man, we wrestle Pennsylvania guys. They're so good on top. So I think in Pennsylvania as a high school level wrestling, they do a good job of developing holistic wrestlers, but particularly they move the needle on top and bottom because they just spend time there.
Right.
There's
And
no secret sauce in the water. It's just good old fashioned, what makes any cluster of, people good anywhere.
speaking of that tradition, and like you've said, you went to Easton, and Easton is known for its tradition in wrestling, and you have a historic coach. When you went there, do you look back? Because I heard you say on the podcast with Ryan, I'm probably going to reference that a lot in this episode. Heard you say that there was a lot of tradition there. Do you look back and kind of shake your head at some of the tradition now, all your time as a coach, or do you think, it was the 90s that stuff was going to happen?
I look back on my time at Easton so favorably, and I think as I get older, I respect one, I respect the principles on which Mr. Powell led the program. at the time it was like, God, Mr. Powell's a hard ass. It's like, but he kicked Billman out of the state. He kicked Jamar Billman out of the practice like 2 days before the state tournament his senior year. It's like nobody was above the law, right? And that was, frustrating sometimes that Mr. Powell was such a hard ass. But now I just respect how much discipline that he ran the program with, and just what he did for the sport, what he did for, what he did for Easton wrestling, but also what he did for the sport more generally across the state. Like he had an epic run in a state where it's really tough to have an epic run. Um, so my memories of Coach Powell are very good. I often call him and talk to him throughout the year about, just coaching philosophy questions. But then, in terms of just the tradition of wrestling at Easton, I took it for granted when I was there because it's all I knew, right? I thought it was normal to have 3,500 people at a high school wrestling match. Um, I thought it was normal for, for people's houses to get decorated before football and wrestling matches against Peaburg. But once I left and I lived in Nebraska and I lived in Denver, I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I lived in Phoenix, I realized like there's nothing like that, like wrestling in the Lehigh Valley. There's nothing like it. So every time I go back, and I'm actually going to go back next week to do some recruiting and stop by Easton's room. But I always tell them, don't take for granted what you have. A lot of times you just take for granted with what you're born into and what you grow up with, because it's just, hey, it's just the way the world is. But it's special. So I actually think the older I get and the more I see other parts of the country, the more I come to value the tradition and the experience I had at Easton. It was pretty awesome.
Coach, with that being said, there's no argument or debate, at least from my perspective, even as a New Jersey wrestler, that Pennsylvania is at the top of the podium. What's your top five?
Well, in terms of wrestlers that put out, in terms of states that put out good college wrestlers, um, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, Jersey, and depending on the year, maybe California. There's been some years that Minnesota's been really good. Jay Robinson did an incredible. He did some incredible things for the sport of wrestling at the state level in Minnesota, in addition to the college level. So there were some hammers that came through Minnesota, but for sure when you look at where the All Americans came from, every year it's Pennsylvania, it's Ohio, it's Illinois, it's Jersey. So I'll give you that as my.
Okay. All right. I was wondering, I wasn't sure if you were going to put Jersey in there for a minute, but I'm curious. Like I said, Jimmy and I were in Denver for about 4.5 years. Do you think for a state like Colorado that maybe is on the come up a little bit, but has not really been a wrestling state, so to speak? Do you think that things, because of winter sports like skiing and snowboarding and ice hockey, that those athletes or families and they tend to generate to those sorts of things, and maybe now more wrestlers are moving into the Denver metro area and other places that you're starting to see some things come up? Andrew Alirez wins a national title.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a pull away from wrestling because it's a winter sport in Colorado. I actually had never even thought about that. It's a good way to think about it. I think prior to you bringing that up, I used to think about Colorado a little bit like the way I think about Nebraska, um, in that they have a few pockets where they have some good wrestlers. They just don't have the depth across the state. I don't think they have the tradition, and that might change. But I also think they struggle. I think it holds you. I think it holds a state back when you have too many classes in the state tournament. You know, Colorado I think has five. Nebraska has four. So, you know, every night. I mean, when there was something like there's like 56 state champions crowned every third week of February in Nebraska. That's wild. Half of that in Pennsylvania, and even and half of Pennsylvania in Jersey. So the competition piece is important to grow the sport and to grow the toughness of the state. Um, just how that competition, asking me about like Easton and like the Valley, how that competition in the Valley kind of elevates the Valley. Same thing on the state level. We so I mean I know there's different reasons for having different classes, but as a competitor and also as a wrestling coach that wants to go watch the state tournament, it's a lot easier to see, one or two classes instead of four or five, particularly in some of these states where they don't have a huge wrestling tradition, you know. But I don't know. Maybe people don't wrestle in Colorado because they're skiing. But it might be a bit of a class thing too. I don't know if the same people that wrestle are the same people that ski, you know?
True.
Yeah.
Good sociological question though.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was wondering too, like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, California, they're very densely populated,
Mhm.
where Colorado's a little bit more spread out. So like Jimmy and I lived in Leadville and I spent a bunch of summers there, and I knew some of the coaches at the high school, and they would say for football that they would travel sometimes like 3, 4, 5 hours to play a game. So I wonder when that's spread out like that, if that cuts down on competition and those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. And that's the experience for the Brock Hardy and the Ridge Lovitz of the world because they're from Utah and Idaho. I mean, it's nothing for them to get in the car and drive 6 hours to, for any sort of like regional or national tournament or any competition really worth their time. It's usually several hour car drive, you know?
Yeah. The Zaddicks used to say that about Montana too. That they were
Yeah.
like 5 hours was like a no big deal car ride with their dad to
Yeah.
go get some wrestling on.
Well, yeah, and like, you live in you live in South Jersey or you live in Lehigh Valley. I mean, you can get damn near anywhere in 5 hours.
Yeah.
You don't even need to go. You can get anywhere really. You can get all the competition you need within
Coach, is Easton double A or triple A?
AAA.
Is there a bias? Is there I'm not looking at those double A kids. Triple A is where it's at.
There's a little partisanship. There's a little tribalism with AA, AAA. I think when you look at it objectively, obviously, AAA thinks they're better than AA, and they are in terms of generating, talent at the next level. But AA has some hammers. They just don't have the depth that AAA has. I think a lot of that has to do with just the amount of kids, the bigger schools, and the amount of kids that are in AAA.
So when we logged on here, you had Doc Snyder on your little ID tag for those listening. What did you get your PhD in? Was it sociology?
Sociology, yep.
Do you use that in your 15 years at Nebraska? Do you use that in your coaching at all?
I mean, yeah, sociology is all about, especially I studied a lot of like cultural sociology where kind of anthropology, some of the theory on anthropology and sociology like overlap. But really, you know, if you want to understand someone, one of the things I take with me every day as a coach is like if you want to understand someone, you need to meet them where they're at. Like you need to see the world how they see the world. And if you want to have any sort of, effective change in their lives, right? Um, so that's very general, but you can use that in anything, right? If you're a manager, if you're a leader in a business and you want to move the needle on your employees, like you can't expect them to just follow blindly, and you got to have a meaningful connection with them. You got to see the world from where they're seeing it if you want to help them, move forward. But particularly as a coach and you work deeply with these guys. Like my relationship with Jordan and James is like it's you can't get much deeper than that. The amount of time that we've spent with each other, like you want to see the world how they see it, right? And you want to say, hey, what do you think about this? So that's sociology 101. So I take that with me everywhere. Um, that's probably the biggest thing. Another thing that I take from it is just I probably I talk about this sometimes in other places, but like my wrestling has informed my life in academia, and my life in academia has also informed my life in wrestling. But my life in wrestling informed like my approach to to school, like the discipline. Like it's really tough to write a dissertation, not because you got to be really smart, but you just have to be extremely disciplined, you know? Um, and so I also learned a lot. I learned a different level of discipline in writing my dissertation. And I was talking to our team the other week about, hey, it's the off season. We need to really encourage you guys to take an active role in your own development. We want to give you guys some ownership. We want to see you, just take ownership when you come in the room. We're not going to come in and run workouts for you every time. We're going to be here twice a week. We'll have structured workouts the other days of the week. We want you to get your own stuff in. And I talked to him about like, hey, like when I had to write my dissertation, I had to take ownership of my own development. Like there was not going to be someone standing over top of me. Like I had to figure out what I wanted to say first, how I was going to say it, right? And then I couldn't move on to the next thing unless I said one thing first. So it's like I couldn't just. I made the analogy like you just can't come in the room and just work on something different every day. I couldn't just go into my office and just write something random every day, right? It had to be like very focused, and I had to understand like how my work that day was contributing to the overall project or the overall vision for the project. It's the same thing. Like when you walk in this room, we've sat down and talked to you about some of your goals, some of the things you want to get better on the off season. Like, is what you're doing today connected to that larger goal? So are you moving the needle on it? Are you tracking it? So those are some of the ways. So that was a little bit of the discipline that I learned with writing my dissertation that I've brought back, and make sure these guys hold themselves accountable to development, particularly when you don't have a coach standing over you and running you through workouts throughout the summer. Which philosophically, I believe strongly in that you can get some of your best work done by yourself, right? Like you can self-start, you find the issue, you find the problem on your own, you find the answer to the problem on your own, you'll never forget it, right? If you always have a coach saying, hey, this is where you need work, this is where you need work, this is where you need work. As a parent now, I kind of get it too. It's like sometimes they just got to figure it out on their own, you know? And there's a deep learning to that. When you come up to an issue, you figure it out, you'll never lose sight of that. It'll always be with you. So we preach a lot of that.
When you get guys as a freshman and you see kind of their work ethic or their way they go about life, have you ever had a moment where you're like, oh, I'm just going to have to teach you how to get structure and focusing on that long term and just not coming in here and throwing stuff on the wall. I'm not necessarily going to have to worry about your technique and your work ethic. I'm just going to have to worry about kind of funneling you in and getting you a little bit more focused.
Absolutely. I mean, no one comes in a finished product, and really no one leaves the finished product, but we try to, we hope that they become a little bit more refined and finished over the course that they're with us. So everyone has their issues when they come in, but that's absolutely it. Like you get guys that are, animals in the room. They'll wrestle their butts off. They'll work hard, but they don't have a game plan for how they're going to get better, And you have the opposite. You have some guys that are only focused on their technical development, and they need to learn how to fight a little bit more, So there's all these kind of needles that we have to move one way or another and try to get the guys, functioning, trying to meet their optimal performance, try to be the best version of themselves, all those cliche sayings that really just mean, we want people to maximize their potential, right? On and off the mat, work hard, be more courageous, wrestle tougher, respond with more resilience, get your butt to class, get off social media, stop talking nonsense on social media, stay off of O Street, it's when you're a college coach, it's like you're everything, right? And for a lot of us, I mean, we recruit all over the country. So when these guys come wrestle in Nebraska, like we're the first line, we're their families, we're the ones that gotta know when they need, a kick in the pants, and when they need a little arm, draped around them and say, hey, what's going on?
So after 15 years with Nebraska as the associate head coach, Are there ever times talking about what we just got talking about and maybe you think maybe I should have got a PhD in psychology?
I mean, to be honest with you, that's what I tend to read more now, you
Yeah.
know? Um, but I think just like I think the intersection, like social psychology, like they both inform each other, right? Because like how we come to think about things is dependent on like the culture we're brought up in. So you're moving from these larger structures to try to understand the individual, and so. But yeah, but I love psychology. I definitely I read more of it now for sure.
And being in the Big Ten, you're always looking at the top of the heat, whether it's state tournaments, Fargo, Beast of the East, Ironman, Powerade.
Mhm.
When you're recruiting, how do you kind of sift through just the wrestler versus, maybe the psychology or the sociology to get the kids that are really going to fit with the culture of the program?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge for recruiting and retention. I mean, I think even at any organizational level, right, is trying to find someone that fits your culture. Um, so for us, and it's easy with all the national rankings and every tournament is streamed live through one company or another, right? You can see it's very easy to see who the top kids are, right? So that's not the tough thing. The tough thing is do we have a shot at them? Like what's our in, right? We're not just like Penn State where we can just go grab anyone, right? It's like I think a lot of the times what draws us to them and what says like, hey, this kid fits. This guy's Nebraska wrestling. So like we look for that. Things we look for is one are they a good person, right? How do they compete? Like, do they compete really hard? Like, do they make some mistakes, but they freaking like they're like rabid dogs. They're courageous warriors. Like we look for that. Um, you can see you can see some things in a wrestling room at a practice that you can't see in competition. And so we like to do that too. We like to go into someone's wrestling room, see how they train with their club or see how they train with their high school team. You can see their work ethic. You can see how they interact with their coaches, which is key, right? You can see how they treat their teammates. Like what we're looking for is someone that's like engaging with their coach, that's a good teammate, that's lifting their teammates up, challenging them, not belittling them, not standing off in the corner thinking that they're better than them. Like those are the things you see. So that all those things are pieces of our culture where you have a good communication structure with your coach. You treat your teammates well. You're a good leader. You're positive. Obviously, you got to work really hard. I always say like Manning and Lazy, they don't get around. They don't get along, right? So like Manning is like as blue collar as they come, farm boy, South Dakota. Um, so yeah, I mean that's the cultural fit we see, and then the other stuff we can see online. I also still like to go to the national tournaments because I want to see them prep for their match. And I want to see how they respond to their wins and how they respond to their losses. You know, you can only see the match when you watch something on Flow or on Rockfin, right? But I want to see, do they go kick a garbage can? Do they, like what do they do? Do they blame someone? Do they argue with their coach? Like all that stuff is so telling for how they're going to be at the next level. Now, it's not determinate. It's not 100% determined about what they're going to be like at the next level, but it is telling, you know? So if you get a few tells that are, pushing you towards, I don't know if this is the guy we need, or the guy we want, then, you know, probably reconsider your recruitment of that guy. But usually the good ones, they check a lot of the boxes.
Coach, I want to go back to some of those tells, but one thing you mentioned a couple questions back was O Street. What's going down on O Street?
O Street's just that's where all the college kids hang out,
All
It's
right.
wild.
All right. So you mentioned some of those tells and you like to watch the guys warm up and you like to watch them post match. Have you ever recruited a kid or wound up taking a kid just you weren't there for him necessarily, but you saw this animal warming up and then you saw him wrestle, then maybe had a tough loss and handled it like a man and you're like, that's a kid I want to talk to and it wound up working out for you?
Absolutely. So this is how I can talk about LJ because he's coming, but this is how I found LJ Araujo from North Dakota, who we really love. I was actually going over there to watch the kid he was going to wrestle, and that he wrestled in the semifinals. At it was either preseason or postseason nationals one year in Iowa. I go to watch this other kid, and he's wrestling LJ. And here's LJ. He's like warming up. He's very focused. I'm like, who is this kid? And this is when he was a sophomore. And then very stingy, very gritty, competed really well. And I came out of that tournament. I went to that tournament to recruit one kid, and I came back recruiting another. So there's sometimes there's those little serendipitous events where someone jumps on your scene, for one reason or another. But particularly for LJ, I did see that. I saw the way he warmed up, and I saw his focus, saw the way he interacted with his coaches, and most importantly for me at that point, it was him, how he competed. He's going to be a beast, by the way.
Look forward to following them. That's one of the perks about this podcast. When you get to talk to their coaches, you get to find out the people to keep an eye out on. So
Yeah.
look forward to that. And you bring up in the recruiting.
Hold on. What do you want, Sissy? All right. My
So
daughter's recently potty trained, so she wants to, now she wants to pee in the grass. So
awesome.
that's what that conversation was about.
So Big Ten, you guys are deep in every weight class, maybe two, maybe three deep in every weight class. And one conversation we like to have with the coaches, how do you kind of have that transparency with your athletes when you're recruiting? Like, hey, this is the place for you, but it's not really going to be the place for you till like 3 or 4 years from now, right? You're going to have to kind of take your lumps. How do you tell a blue chipper? How do you tell a kid who's placing in Fargo, hey, we want you, but you're going to have to sit behind an All-American?
Well, we don't really have that conversation. It's more of a hey, for some of the guys, we don't like much overlap. Like in our world, in our perfect recruiting world, everyone stays the same way we recruited them. And then you have a graduating senior come in as a freshman, and they redshirt behind a fifth year senior. They get a year under their belt, and then they go 4 years straight, right? So like this is how it worked and this was like beautiful. This is how it worked from James Green to Tyler Berger to Peyton Robb, and now to Antrell Taylor. So Antrell, there was one overlap year, but what did Antrell do? So Antrell he was behind Peyton Robb. But the reason it was an overlap is because the COVID year. So Peyton got an extra year, right? Because otherwise, and it was going to work out perfectly. But that's how it works well. Like when James was a senior, Tyler Berger was a freshman, right? But he redshirted that year. So that's the way it works. If a kid is just too good and he doesn't fit perfectly within that little 4 year cycle, we just say, hey, you're special. We want you to wrestle at Nebraska, and you're going to figure it out. Like we feel like you're good enough that the best guys always find their way in that weight class. And in the case of Antrell Taylor this year, I mean, that's what happened, right? He redshirted last year. He was behind Peyton at 57 this year. So we went up to 65, and he was an All-American, you know? So that's it. I mean, we have to do we have to do some maintenance once in a while when someone grows out of a weight class. We lost a couple guys in the portal, one guy in the portal because we brought him in, and then we had a guy that we recruited for 25 move up to 33. Just didn't, sometimes kids grow, and that's no fault of us. But Manning always says, like, our job is to make the room tougher, right? Our job is to bring competition in the room. And we have a very, very fair process. And one thing I always tell guys, like, if they can't quite see like where they fit in, I'll just tell them this, like, hey, here's where we see you. But if things change, you're always going to have a fair shake at the spot. 100%. Manning doesn't care how much money you're on, where you're from, who your dad is. All he's concerned with in terms of setting his varsity lineup is who's going to compete the best and who's going to represent Nebraska the best. So we do a couple things, but we have a couple markers for like when someone actually wins the spot. One is the wrestle off. Okay. Important. How do you live out the culture of Nebraska wrestling? Do you work hard? Do you live your life right outside the room? Do you compete courageously? That's another meaningful point. And then the other one is, how do you compete against guys from other schools? Because you've seen it in our career. Like, we've seen the guy who's the best in the room, but then when he goes and competes against someone else, they get beat, right? So what we try to do early in our year is we schedule tournaments where we can like for the Navy Classic, for instance, like you can bring 15 guys to Navy Classic, and it's the third week of November. So it's perfect when you're trying to set your lineup. And if we have some competitive weight classes, we bring 2 guys at 33, we bring 2 guys at 65, we bring 2 guys at heavyweight. And we say, hey, I mean, this right here is going to set the stage for Vegas, right? So, because to me, that's the most important piece. How do you compete against guys on other teams, right? But those are the 3 markers. They each carry a little bit different weight, but that's how we kind of holistically weigh each roster decision or starting spot decision.
Coach, you mentioned Tyler Berger a minute ago. He just announced that he was going to be stepping into the world of mixed martial arts. You've had a lot of time to spend with him in the room. Is he nasty? Can he throw hands? Are you excited to see him step into the octagon?
I am. One, because he's a great competitor. One of the things, I mean, why he's been had so much success in his career is in large part because he's very competitive. He's also a really hard worker. But I'm excited. He likes to get chippy in the room, so I think it's a very easy transition for him, to move over to the world of MMA.
All right, I'm excited. I saw that announcement last week, and I was like, all right, here we go. Another NCAA wrestler going into the ranks of mixed martial arts to
Yeah,
stomp
and
out some
wrestlers
strikers.
they have such good success because they have such good success because we spend all day freaking basically scrapping. One second.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I'm on the phone. Come over here and say hello. Hey, you see Daddy's talking to some people? See, I'm talking to
What's
some
up?
people? Yeah. Tell him your name is Tilly.
Hi,
You're Tilly.
Tilly.
Say hello. All right, hey, go downstairs. I'll be right there. I'll be down in a little while, okay? Yeah. All right.
That's the first.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that.
All
Oh,
good,
you're all
Coach.
good.
So
261 episodes, Coach. You're breaking records over here. That is the first child appearance on the
Yeah.
podcast. So we've had a couple pets, but
Yeah. She's definitely a handful. She's very she's independent for sure.
is she the youngest?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have a 6-year-old and she's gonna turn 3 um in July.
Okay.
So she's not quite 3. She's wild.
so
My
Keeps you
son
young,
is more
doesn't
of
it?
my son is like the sweeter soul of the two. Tilly is like the fiery one.
Is she gonna
So,
be the wrestler?
well, Gus wrestles right now, but I think she's going to beat him here in a couple of years.
Okay.
She's tough.
So, like Rich said, we a first meeting your daughter Tilly, and another first. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're our first associate head coach that we've ever had on. And we always like to ask the coaches what their CEO position looks like as a head coach, how they run their program. I'm curious to what your position looks like. You programming the workouts, you getting on the mats, you doing fundraising, all the above.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of like my role is a little bit of, Swiss Army knife. I do a little bit of everything. Chiefly I'm on the mats. Either run and work out or wrestling with the guys. I still work out, a few times a week. So that's great. I also serve as like the director for our regional training center, our 501(c)(3). So I wear the fundraising hat and cultivate donors there. So I do all that stuff, write copy, everything for the NWTC. But back to my role, I serve as the kind of contact between a lot of offices on campus, whether it's academics or compliance, business office. I do the budget. I input the budget, things like that. So I do a lot of probably what you would call like COO stuff, like operations. If you want to think of it in terms of like like a business position, do a lot of that, and then yeah, a lot of wrestling. But we spend a ton of time talking about our team, talking about our guys. So that's a very collaborative, very democratic process between all the coaches where we value everyone's opinion. Where are we at as a team? What do we need? Um, and then we also do the same thing with our guys, like every day. That's the core of our time is like, hey, what's so and so need? How is he today? Like what's on the horizon for him? And then, so our week is structured, particularly during season, that we do one of our days a week is always an individual workout. Like that's the guy's workout for the day, for the week, and for the one individual for the week, and for the day, that's his only workout. So we spend a lot of time putting those together. And then when it's individual day, it's just coaching all day. You're in the room for 3-4 hours, just doing individual work, and you're probably in there for another hour or two, you know, in between individuals, watching someone else run an individual. So we do that, and then because I'm an alumni and I've been here for a while, I have a lot of really good ties with the alumni. So I'm the chief contact and for organizing and bringing, for alumni support, bringing people back for events, and just general, calling guys on my way in and way home. And um, not just because they're alumni and it's the right thing to do, but it's just because a lot of them are still my really good friends.
You take a
Talking
lot of
about
ice baths, coach?
What's that?
You take a lot of ice baths?
No shot.
No. What are you
I
doing for recovery?
I sauna.
Okay.
So
All right.
I can't do. So our athletic trainer is a beast. Tyler Weeda, he's he actually the whole Peyton Robb saga. He was the unsung hero, and actually his praises were a little sung, I guess, to the end. But he's a maniac with that. He's cold showers, he's cold tubs, 20-minute saunas at 220. You know, I can do the hot exposure, the cold exposure, not too much.
Okay.
But we did a nice 20-minute sauna at 220 today. 220's tough.
Yeah. You got an Airdyne in there or anything crazy like that? Yeah, got
No,
oven mitts
no,
going,
no. At 220 for 20 minutes, you're just holding on. You're trying to
holding
you're
on for
trying to
dear
create, you're
life.
trying to carry a conversation so you can keep everyone's mind off the heat. I was in there with my boy Lenny Pinto today, so he's a Stroudsburg guy. Um, and we were working our way through it, telling stories, and then next thing you know, we actually lost track of time, and the timer went off, and we go, "Whew, I'm glad the timer hit. Let's go."
Coach, talking about doing those one-on-ones during the season, how often does that become a therapy session and not wrestling at all?
So that's actually one of Manning's charges is like we got to know what's going on. Okay. On the mat, you want to this is where you find what moves the needle for them in terms of motivation. So you're 100% correct. Like that's like the deep learning, that's the deep mentoring that goes on in that in those one-on-ones. So that's great. And so you're right. So we do a lot of like technical development. We also just sometimes we just sit and talk about stuff, right? We watch some film. We'll talk about, last week's performance, what to expect for this week. Just, like I said, like moving the needles on different aspects of their performance. Talking to them about um, how they approach the match, what their first touch needs to look like. Like if this happens, like let's play through some scenarios here. So you end up being the closest with the guys that you're personal coaches with, just because you have these intimate relationships kind of structured into your week. So you're absolutely right.
Coach, talking about being in contact with a lot of the alumni, you've gotten the opportunity to work with two very legendary New Jersey wrestlers that are alumni. And I know I got this right. You came in after Jordan had already been on campus for a bit, correct?
Yeah, I was back for Jordan's senior year. That was my first year back,
Okay.
was his senior year. Yep.
Okay. And then with James as well too, he's a legend in New Jersey. You got to work with him when Jordan his senior year. Did you know I mean, he had some tough competition just to make the team after NCAs. And with James, when did you know that they were going to take off?
So Jordan's path to the world team happened pretty quick, because the US Open is so quick after the NCAAs. He had a great NCAA season, and then I think there was people doubting him a little bit. They thought, could he hold up, to the hand fight of Andrew Howe, which Jordan always says was one of his toughest competitors ever. So I think Jordan had a few doubters in the year. And then I think it was just like, hey, interested to see how this Burroughs kid's going to do at the Open. And he was not refined at all. He was shooting doubles. He was getting chest wrapped. He was getting head pinched. He was getting gut wrenched. I mean, he was just out there scrapping for his life. I just because I've been in the room with JB, I knew that just his collection of attributes and his psychological profile is just really freaking tough to beat. So yeah, I was like, yeah, he can make a world team. And then he made the world team. I'm like, dang, he he wrestles a style that internationally is like really good. A lot of guys are Eastern European, the Russians, they like to wrestle. Once you get to their leg, they like to wrestle. I'm like, Jordan likes to get two legs and get you off your feet. It's tough to start wrestling when he gets to your legs. And then just as that, really the pivotal match for me was, his second match at the World Championships in 2011 was he wrestled Sargush. Dennis Sargush was returning two-time world champ. And it was a dog fight. That's when Sargush was grabbing his singlet. I don't know if you guys remember, and he
Hmm.
grabbed the singlet so much that he actually tore it. Like, do you know how hard it is to tear one of those singlets? Singlets are sturdy these days, right?
Yeah.
Um, after that, it was just like he's gonna rock and roll this. Um, and then he became more professional. Then his technique got good, then his lace got good, and then his diet got better, his social life got better, and then he was still he had not worried about the diet thing at all in 2011, right? He was sleeping on my couch and eating whatever and drinking whatever, um, and still just a tremendous competitor. So when you have someone that competes at the level of JB, backed up with the work ethic and the way he lives his life, like that's the recipe for GOAT status, you know? Um, so that kind of happened quick. James's was more, James was my first recruit. So, that was the guy that I spent the most time with early on. And, James lost his first two matches out of the gate as a true freshman to guys that you don't even, I could tell you their names and you don't even remember them. So, he had a rocky start and he had some, he never placed at Fargo, the infamous story where he had to wrestle back at Fargo and somebody knocked on his door. James was sleeping with headphones on, never got the knock to come back over to the session at Fargo and just didn't place. that was James Green. But James's trajectory was a little bit more up and down, but the overall trajectory of it was good. So I saw James, a lot of growth in James. Um, and it wasn't long. I think it was James's like third or fourth year, third or fourth years when he made the the university games team, right? So he won universities, right? And then he won two of them. So he went to the university games and he went to university worlds back to back. And I was like, James, like Jordan, had a style that was really good internationally. Guys aren't used to that style. Hard hands, quick double legs, like they're you got to wrestle them on their feet. So we felt good. We thought James had some really good, potential to make some international teams. But again, like when he did it, Marable kind of owned him his first couple years on the senior circuit. And he had beat him in the open earlier that year. And then the infamous Marable didn't make weight for the trials. James beats Schlater in the finals of the trials, but he's only the trials champ. He's not the world team member because remember, I don't know if you do remember all the craziness that happened with James and Marable in 2015.
Vaguely, yeah.
So so James so Marable didn't make weight for the trials. But because he was the US Open champion, you have certain concessions afforded to you. And one of them is if you get hurt within 24, if you get hurt before the actual trials, you can postpone the wrestle off, whatever. Because he wasn't in the trials, he was just sitting in the trials finals, right? So James goes through the tournament and he beats Schlater. And again, like I said, he beats Schlater two straight matches. Um, maybe he just beat him once. Anyways, I remember them not announcing James as the world team member because they knew this arbitration was still going to happen. So Marable's team took the case to arbitration, and then they ended up granting Marable a wrestle off with James to make the world team. After James took third at the Open and then won the trials, now he's got to wrestle Marable in Fargo during junior nationals. So me and James and Manning drive up to Fargo and weigh in, and you know James, that was the moment that I knew James Green was ready because he beat Marable in two straight matches, something he had never done before. And he did it pretty convincingly. He did it with a lot of the stuff that Marable had done to him, like positioning, underhook, pushing him out. And I was like, wow, this guy grew. And I think that having that summer of adversity where you take third in the Open, you don't get what you want, and then you win the trials, but you're not the world team member. And then you go to Spain and you compete internationally and you do well. And then when you're in Spain, you realize, oh, I got to wrestle in 2 weeks to make the world team. And I think all that adversity created something in James that took him to the next level that year, right? And obviously, 2015 was really special because it was James's first world team. But for me as a coach, it was James and Jordan's first world team together. You know, James had always kind of been like little brother to JB, right? Not to us, but just to the world. But it was nice to see those guys on the mat, and for some reason they were always like called up to the mat at the same time. So like I was in James's corner, Manning was in JB's corner, and they were like ripping off like double leg, lace, 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 double leg, and they were like, it was a special moment. So obviously he's bronze there, and in 2017 he was silver. So and he made six world teams. It's hard to do. It's hard to make one. James made six.
Yeah.
So I love those guys. He's got some more world teams to make, by the way. James does.
How's his hip?
His hip is fantastic, and that was really the kind of the catalyst for him to come back is after he had his hip surgery. He said for the first time in a long time, like he didn't have any pain anymore. So his hip was so bad. He got surgery after the World Championships in 2017. So I mean that was the year that James was silver and the US won it, right? But James's hip was so gnarly to the point that he had to get it repaired right after that. So that training and that what was internationally James's best career, was internationally James's best year of his career. He was not 100% for. And now it's incredible. He's back. Wrestles every day.
Do you two
Little
square
guys,
up at
big
all?
guys. What's that?
Do you two square up at all?
That ship has sailed. We
Smarter, not harder.
yeah, um we get close to trials time. We spend a lot of time together drilling and wrestling. But he's got so many great workout partners. He
Yeah.
doesn't need me anymore.
Rich, you got anything for Coach before we get into the Final Four?
I got two more.
Go for it.
Coach, we talked about, I want to go back to take a trip down memory lane, Easton High. One of your teammates. He's well known around the wrestling community. What can you say about Willie?
Willie, he's my main man. He's my ride or die. Um, I mean, Willie's my best friend in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really is. He's he's crazy. He's unpredictable. You don't never know if he's sleeping or if he's awake. Or I'm like, when I talk to him in the morning, I'm like, okay, so did you just wake up or you haven't have you hadn't not been asleep yet? You know? Um, he's great. He's the godfather to my son. So he's my guy. The funny story about Willie is like when I first met him, so he was good. He was going to Wilson then, and I grew up in Easton, but I don't know if you know kind of how Wilson and Easton are. Like Easton basically is around Wilson. The high schools are about 2 blocks from each other, and the school districts make no sense. So like Easton basically encompasses all of Wilson, but somehow Wilson is double A and it's a different district and people go to different schools. It's crazy. I can't explain it to anyone. But me and my friend from South Side of Easton, we rode our bikes over to hang out with Willie's sister and one of her friends, just hanging out. And I was like 15 years old, so Willie was 16, and that may have been 14, and he may have been 15. But I walk into his house on like a Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock. He's sitting there drinking a 40, watching Yo MTV Raps. And I'm thinking, how how he could do so many things when he was young that I couldn't even dream about doing. So he had this like mythic, like before we were friends, had this like mythical status. Like he used to run Wilson and he used to be able to do these things that no one else could do. So that was the first time I ever met Willie. And then obviously we formed a bond over wrestling and we were into the same things. We were into freaking rap, hip hop and wrestling and so we grew, um there was, I came to Nebraska and he did his thing. And to be honest with you, we got really close when I came back to school in Nebraska, like 2023, sorry, 2003. Um, we got really close. So I moved back to Nebraska. He he moved with me. He lived in Lincoln with me for a little bit. And yeah, he's my main man. Not without, he's not without his his controversies.
Was he one of the guys getting
Sometimes
thrown
say,
out?
"Hey Willie," I'll text him, "Willie, stop tweeting." All right.
Was he one of the guys getting thrown out of the room frequently?
No, Willie wasn't. He was not as much as a rebel as like me and Billman were. Like I've always had a problem with authority. Like my dad said it since I was like little. Like I always had a problem with authority. So like sometimes just couldn't bite my tongue. And so Mr. Powell would kick me out of practice, or he would, I remember sometimes I'd be drilling with Jamar and like, Mr. Powell was a hard ass. And sometimes it came off like a little condescending. And so I would like, chirp back at him and Jamar's like, "Brian, shut up. Don't say anything." We're drilling. I'm like, no. Um, no, Willie was actually pretty good. Believe it or not, he was also like he ran like a freaking billy goat. Like on Sundays, we used to have to go to the state park, Jacobsburg Park, and run as a team on our day off, which always drove me freaking crazy. I had to drive 25 minutes on my day off to go run in a park. I could have just ran out my front door. But he would be the one that was like flying. So he was about it. He's my main man.
Awesome. Awesome. And last one I got, Coach, you're in the Big Ten now. When you came up, you were in the Big 12. So some crazy happenings down in Stillwater this week. Do you have any hot takes or thoughts on the OSU shakeup and the new coaches that were announced today?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably top 3 biggest wrestling hire of all time, you know? Um, I mean, you can't, so I'll just be a fan for a minute and just an overall, just a fan of the sport. It's exciting, you know, it's exciting. And you have David Taylor, the reigning Olympic champ, taking over a program with the history of Oklahoma State, you know. There were some rumblings that something like they might try to do something big, but nobody really thought about this, you know. It's kind of like Kale going to Penn State, you know what I mean? Or Gable going to Iowa, So it's in that same vein that I look at it. Um, I also think it changed the game a little bit just in terms of some of the crazy numbers I'm hearing in terms of our resources with, the billionaire guy they have from Paycom. So, but from a purely wrestling perspective, I like it. Shakes it up a little bit. It does. It does. It's gonna be interesting to see how the plan plays out.
Do you have an over under on the amount of time that OSU gets back on the podium?
I
Can you still
don't.
be a fan and make that prediction?
I see. It's tough for me to be a fan on that one.
Yeah, okay. Understandable. Understandable.
Coach, so we're talking about shakeups, and one last one I have for you before we get in the Final Four. But we're talking about shakeups. We had a coach on, and then the next day he got hired somewhere else. So you've been there for 15 years, been the assistant. You get the itch to be a head coach. Are we gonna get off this call and tomorrow there's gonna be a big announcement that you're head coach somewhere, or is Nebraska
No,
your place you're staying at?
I'm Nebraska. I'm Nebraska. My life is here, and yeah, this is where I'm going to stay.
All right,
Awesome.
respect. So, Coach, first Final Four I have for you. I know you said it before. How do you take your coffee, or how do you brew your coffee, and how do you take it?
I have a really nice espresso machine that my wife Jess brought me back from one of her corporate events. It's an espresso, so I do like a long pull of espresso and a short pull of espresso and a little half and half. That's my morning coffee.
Nice, nice. Are you one and done? Do you have a favorite roaster in Lincoln?
No, so I get all my stuff. I get the ristretto blend of Nespresso sent to me, Amazon. So it's like the extra strong.
Okay, right on.
Now, if I'm in Lincoln, so that's my home brew, but like my ride or die in Lincoln is the mill. If you're ever in Lincoln, you got to go
Mill.
to the mill. There's 4 locations. And they're the best. They've been around forever. They do it really good.
Okay, put the mill on the list, Jim.
Yeah.
Coaches, two Jersey guys, if we were ever to, drive out to Colorado or something again, or make our stop in Lincoln, is there a go-to restaurant or something that we would need to check out, like a steakhouse, a burger joint, something
I
like
give you
that?
two places.
Okay.
I give you two places. In Lincoln, you got to go to the Oven, which is I've been all around the country and the world, and I'm telling you, it's some of the best Indian food I've ever had. So it's called the Oven. It's in the Haymarket. It's you can't miss on that. And then 50 miles up the road, if you want the best steakhouse in the Midwest, it's the Drover. And
Drover.
there's nothing better. I know there's some steakhouses in Omaha that try to be like Vegas steakhouses or Scottsdale steakhouses, and they're neither. Like the Drover is a Nebraska steakhouse. It's like an old cowboy bar, and they don't try to be anything that they are, that they're not. They're not pretentious, and they have the best steak. Get the whiskey fillet. Don't even think about it.
Done.
Done.
Say no more. Coach, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Bryan Snyder?
Prior to having these damn kids, I did. No, I do. So here's when I'm at my best. I'm at my best when I read and I write. I try to do it every day. So I I try to get up. Like I do get up early, just by nature. That's kind of how I'm wired. I'm up early, so I like to read, and I like to write. Right, I like to just think about my craft. Think about I read a lot of stuff. Like I'm interested in culture in general. Like I worked I my big part of my dissertation was cultural sociology. I geek out on reading like the old lectures on culture, like what culture is, like Clifford Geertz, like all these amazing anthropologists. But I'm also interested in this just general conversation that's going on with culture. Like, what does it mean to have a good team culture? What does it mean to have a good business culture? So like all that stuff I like to read about and write about. I read a lot of existentialism books, like why are we here? What's it all mean? So um that, and then recently I've added in, I've tried to most nights, again, depending on the kids, when everything's settled, I go for a walk with a podcast and just chill.
All
Awesome.
right. Well, that goes right into our next question. What are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
Yeah, so my favorite podcast is the All In podcast. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but it's Jason Cal, or it's Jay Cal, it's David Sachs, it's Chamath from Facebook, but they basically talk about all things like political, tech, what's going on in the world, business. That's really good. My buddy John May, who's an alumni, put me onto that. Um, I'm listening to, the podcast that I like a lot. I've always liked Lex Friedman. I'm listening to an Andrew Huberman one with a guy named David Yeager, How to Master Growth Mindset. Really good, really fascinating. So that's my podcast. I'm reading the book A Random Walk Down Wall Street right now. Also geek out a little bit on just like finance, and I mean, that's been one of 2021. My New Year's resolution was become more financially literate. So I've read more like business and some business books, just or just finance books on the economy. Um, and then what do I listen to? I listen to a lot. My favorite band is the Grateful Dead. So I listen to a lot of Grateful Dead. Um, my son loves Zach Bryan. He got caught up in the 6-year-old loves Revival. So listen to a lot of that. Sturgill Simpson, Zach Bryan. And I like old school hip hop. Tribe
Okay.
Called
So,
Quest,
Yes.
TV. Um, that's my De La Soul. Those are my favorites.
so two things, and I know I'm gonna beat Rich to one of these. What is your favorite Dead album? Do you have a favorite concert
Concert.
or
Yeah.
Cornell 76?
That's a really good one. That's a really good one. I love that one. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not say that one. So I do like that one a lot. Um, there's also a one, and I used to have the DVD of it, but it was 89 and it was somewhere, and it's a really good rendition of Deal. So I mean, I have my certain songs that they did live. Well, I'll tell you this though. There's a great, so when Jerry split off and he did the Jerry Garcia band, he has a phenomenal album that's mainly covers, like Van Morrison cover, Bright Side of the Road. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that, heard that one, but that's a must listen to.
All right, I will check that out. And then the other thing I got for you, if you're going for a walk one night and you want to get lost in some crazy deadhead stories, we had an episode on with a gentleman named Joel Blazer, and he wrote a book called Letters from Marion, a deadhead's journey from peace to supermax prison.
Okay.
And he followed the debt around. He sold LSD, and he went to jail and wrote a book about his whole story. It's a crazy episode, but I think you might enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. That's awesome.
It's funny too, Coach, that you talk about the Dead because I just sent Jimmy a song that popped up today on my Spotify. It's Ship of Fools live at the University of Nevada, Reno, and it's from May 12th, 1974.
All right. I'll check it out, man.
And then you
Always
mentioned
love a
you,
good, I always love a good dead reference. There was a few years ago that I thought my life was complete because my son Gus asked Alexa to play Fire on the Mountain
that's a good one.
unsolicited from dad. So I was like, all right,
That's a
I'm
good
done. My
one.
work's done here.
And you mentioned a tribe in 1996 at the Madison Square Garden. I saw a Tribe Called Quest, the Beastie Boys, and Biz Markie.
I saw that same tour, but I saw it in Philly.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it
All
in
right.
Philly.
That's
Did
awesome.
Bismarcky, did Benny and the Jets?
Yeah, yeah, I saw
Nice.
that same tour.
That's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
Coach, last one we have for
I
you has
think
been
Willie was with me, believe it or not. Yeah.
It's
oh,
even cooler.
that
Yeah.
is Coach, last one we have for you has been an honor and a pleasure to chat with you tonight. Do you have a guilty pleasure or guilty pleasures? It could be food. We talked about, you spent some time in Colorado. Maybe you're a whiskey or a craft beer connoisseur. Mention some music. Are you a Swiftie?
I'm not a hater. She's good. I'm not, I wouldn't call myself a Swiftie, but I'm also not a hater. Um, yeah, I'm not a big drinker, but I do love to taste the world's IPAs. It's probably my favorite beer. So I like a few IPAs, and I still have a stash of Cuban cigars that I accumulated during my travels overseas from the actual Cubans. So, nice afternoon, Cuban cigar, and a couple IPAs is not a bad day.
All right. I like it. So, Coach, is the, like the Fargo singlet trade, is that something that goes on at Worlds and stuff? Or guys swapping stuff?
Not really.
No.
Not really.
Cubans are just bringing cigars to make some extra money.
Yeah, I actually swapped a pair of shoes for a box of Cubans once. It
Solid.
wasn't my trade either. He asked for it. We 2014 we trained with the Cubans um at at the Italian Olympic Training Center before the 2014 Worlds. So like Cuba, Italy, France, and US all trained at the Italian Olympic Training Center for acclimation camp before the Worlds in 2014. So spent a lot of time with the Cubans. So there's more time to hang out with them, and there was more time to, one time he's liked my shoes and had a box of Cubans. It was an easy trade for me.
Are they really a step above everything else?
They really are.
Yeah.
They're now I'm sure there's just from my experience, and I'm not a big cigar smoker. I just kind of it's like the idea like, hey, I got these overseas, and it's like it's the novelty of it all. But they're just they're just different. They're better.
Awesome. Coach, we forgot to ask you this up front, but if you want to give all your socials or the school socials, the team socials, we're happy to put it in the show notes for you as well. I apologize for not asking you when we started.
Yeah, so what am I? I'm Doc underscore Snyder on Instagram, and I'm Brian double underscore Snyder on Twitter. Am I? Yeah, double underscore at Brian underscore or double underscore Snyder. Um, our socials for is at Husker Wrestling Twitter, and I believe it's the same for Instagram. Although I think Instagram may have changed to just Nebraska. Hold on a second. No, at Husker Wrestling, both Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome. We'll put those in the show notes for you as well.
Coach, thank you so much for your time. I've been a fan since I was a sophomore in high school, and the dude from Nebraska came on the NCAAs with the shaggy hair and the one love, one people tattoo. I was like, that's my guy. So thank you so much for your time. We really enjoyed it.
Hey, this was a blast, man. I'm glad we can make it work. And you guys take care. If you guys ever come through the Midwest, make sure to hit me up. I'll take you out for the steak at the Drover, all right?
You got that right. We'll hit you up for sure.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate